Hello, everyone, and welcome to People of Interest. People of Interest is a show that is based on the stories from people like me and you. I am your guest, Miguel Guanipa, and today I am your host, Miguel Guanipa.
Yeah, I don't want to be the host.
My special, maybe you can be the host today, why not? And I have a very special guest today. His name is Greg Maxim. He's a licensed mental health counselor, and he told me also that he's an okay guy. So thank you very much for coming,
Absolutely.
Greg. I really appreciate it. You showing up. um, I was one of the things that before we started talking. You mentioned, but maybe we shouldn't get into that too quickly. But you look at your life in terms of chapters, right? And I wanted to go directly, actually, to a question about that. See if you could tell me something about when you look at those chapters in your life. Let's talk about. Tell me a chapter in your life in which you experienced um, conscious personal growth, meaning that you kind of knew you were growing and you experienced it very personally.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I know when I first saw the show, when you were talking about everyone's got a story, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many stories. There's a lot of different chapters at different points in my life, and I think, or anybody's life. So I sort of compartmentalized that a little bit. I think one time I think that I can really think about it was like a really conscious effort, and my wife would probably agree, is in 1997. My wife was giving birth to second child, and I said I'm going back to grad school. So I think that there was a very conscious effort at that point in time. I already had gone through college, had gone through grad school, but was really sort of focused in a really sort of different part of my career. And through that experience, I sort of realized I needed to sort of become a licensed mental health counselor. That didn't exist at one point in time. That license was not something that had even been created yet. So at that point in time, it was sort of became clear that that's really the route that I needed to go. So the idea of starting grad school at the age I was in 1997.
So you were like what, 35 or
Oh
something?
yeah, I was 27. So, but at the same point, again, we had a small child at home. Again, she was giving birth, but at the same point, I really felt like there was a point in my life that I really needed to sort of go back to some work that I had done with youth and worked with families and so forth. So that's when I went back to grad school. So that was a time I can think of pivotally and consciously sort of said to myself that this is really sort of what I want to do. And even at that point in time, I was working in an insurance company at the time, and I was working as a consultant or around HMOs and around psychiatric claims and those types of things. So I was really removed from the human contact piece,
Yeah.
but really was working at it from an administrative and a sort of an insurance perspective. But knowing I needed that license, went back to grad school and realized, I had to do a rotation at Marlborough Hospital. Was doing some work there in terms of the psychiatric ward and sort of their day treatment and their outpatient program. I said, I'm sort of liking this again. This is reminding me of what I used to do at one point. And at that point, when I used to work in the direct care, there was no such thing as a licensed mental health counselor.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm going to get back into this. I'm going to look into this, and it really sort of sparked me again. And that's when I sort of realized that really it wasn't working for the insurance company; it was really working with people. So I think that was a pivotal time for me at that point in
Yeah.
1977, and at that point, and I can sort of say, hey, my daughter actually went to my graduation, so that's a good
Oh,
thing.
is that right?
So
So you were doing mental health for a while. Then you've been doing that
I've been
since.
for a long time.
Yeah.
So I think initially, and I think I way back in the early '90s, or actually I'll say the '80s. But again, was only 27 at that time. But in the '80s, no, I was working in the field. I had a master's degree in counseling. It was very different back then, and was providing services. I worked for the Department of Mental Health for a period of time. I worked for the Mass Rehab Commission for a period of time, and other nonprofit organizations until I moved into sort of the corporate world and working with insurance. So literally going back years. I mean, decades. And I can even sort of say in high school, I was working as running a Big Brother program in high school. So there
you
was always that piece that was always there in terms of that
the human
service.
So you prefer to have more the interactions with people than
Absolutely.
doing the paperwork and
Doing the paperwork and doing the sort of administrative piece or being on the insurance side of things.
Okay.
It was good for a period of time. It was an education that sort of provided me some understanding of, the workings of, insurance. And so that was beneficial for sure.
Yeah.
But at the same point, it wasn't my heart and my passion wasn't there.
So why is the working with people something that you prefer? Then tell me about that.
Well, I think it's been a sort of whether it was a skill set or whether it was just developed, I think, in terms of as time. Like I said, in high school, I was running a Big Brother, Big Sister program as a junior and senior in high school. So it was really sort of a part that at that point was sort of really looking at providing that service. I think I started off as a Big Brother. Then it worked on to I was involved with a church group, and then we noticed that there were so many kids that were really waiting to have a match for an older brother or sister. There was too many. So what I did at that point was develop a waiting list group. So all the kids that were waiting, we had group activities and those kinds of things. So really looking at what the need was and then what the solutions could be to that. And it looked different for different things and sort of thinking outside the box. So I think that's where it began in terms of that program and, and going off to school, sort of thinking, there was originally I was going to be an architect at one point.
Oh, yeah?
I'm like, how did I get here?
I
Then I was
wanted
going to be a
an
minister, and
architect,
then but anyway, it landed in psychology,
Yeah.
And that's sort of where it stayed. There is that sort of that human connection and sort of that social service piece and that humanitarian piece and social justice.
Yeah.
I think that all sort of fit together.
So this was a desire that you have. When did you first remember that? If you can go back as far as you want, but when do you first think that perhaps you're going to have not necessarily a career, but a path somewhere that involved dealing with people? Do you always have a desire to have interactions with people?
I think the
since you were
desire
young,
was
or-
there from the beginning. I don't
Yeah.
think there was. I think it was in different relation, whether it was going to be at one point thinking about retail or whatever. You're still working with the public or whatever. But the fact was, it really became in sort of the helping profession.
Yeah.
Seemed to be the piece that sort of was drawn to. And I think that could be again related to family, or it could be related to just role models in terms of what that might be in terms of seeing people doing good things for people. And at the same point, that sort of resonated with me, and I sort of wanted to pursue that.
Yeah.
At the same point, didn't realize it was actually going to be a career.
Yeah.
Thought it was going to be like, okay, everyone's doing these nice things for other people, and that sort of felt good. I think it made me feel good. At the
Yeah.
same point, there was a realization that there is sort of options there in terms of what that looks like,
Yeah.
and how you sort of progress in terms of doing that as a career.
Did you have a role model when you were a young kid?
A young kid, there was a lot of role models, I think, and I think
One
there's
that related to that.
I think there's when I think about it in terms of I think when I sort of think about it in chapters,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that are really have been role models and inspirational in a lot of different ways, and I think some of those have been people I've worked with.
Tell me about some of them.
Oh, that's more recent, and I think I actually asked him before I was coming on the show. I said, hey, I'm going to do this show talking about things that have sort of affected my life and sort of what I'm doing, and I said, and your name comes to mind in terms of that. So it's somebody that I worked with years ago in terms of providing service and anger management, and I'll say that because I know he says it publicly as well.
Yeah.
Who's at a point now where he's really giving back to the community, he's giving back. So I feel like he is an inspiration to a lot of people. So he's actually now an employee and sort of working in one of our new programs that are here in town, sort of working with those that have been affected by addiction. That he's done an amazing job and is sort of really giving back to. So I feel like he's an inspiration. That gives you sort of look at sort of work that you've done, even though it might be a small piece in terms of what component that you maybe provided for them. They have a lot of other people and a lot of other places and things that sort of affected their life, and you see it come together, and you see it come together in a young man that sort of is now taking it on his own and sort of being able to sort of do something with that through a lot of turmoil in his own life.
So why do you want to become an architect?
I love, you know what? I even fit that into my job now. So as much, I love the idea of sort of doing floor plans. It was just a different kind of thing. It was dealing with paper, it was pencils, and I did drafting classes, and I
Yeah.
did enjoy it. At the same point, when I there's a component in the job where I was developing mental health clinics.
Yeah.
So I have a clinic that's here in town, but also there's one in Worcester. There's some things you have to do working with architecture and sort of design and sort of like reflective ceiling plans and things you wouldn't think anybody with a psychology degree would be thinking about.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of regulations that come along with Department of Mental Health in terms of clinics and so forth. And I think that so there it plays a little bit in terms, that need of sort of like designing and sort of coming up with floor plans and what that looks like and how things are designed. So
you still have that
I
in you.
felt that it was still, that need was met in terms of doing that piece, in terms of designing offices and so forth. So
Well, okay. So next time you open another office, then you're also gonna put in those skills in
absolutely.
there.
I mean, that's another chapter. That's another chapter. Then it's coming soon. So I think that's a absolutely. So there's skills that are sort of built upon other skills, and I think that's a something that's just of an interest and something like it was a hobby. I think I remember sort of just sitting drafting as a kid, different sort of plans and stuff. So it's like, why does a kid do that? But anyway, I did it, and it's sort of like it's a fun little thing to do for me. So when we're looking at building a clinic or something, it's sort of the same idea in terms of that.
Well, let's go back a little bit now. Trying to connect that desire that you had in your heart to be that seek a path where you be helping people. Now, when you were growing up, how many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had a brother and two sisters, so I'm the youngest of four. So
youngest.
I'm the baby. So, yeah, and I think initially, and I don't. I think about the family and sort of what roles people. One went into teaching, one into sort of film, and another one was more into really sort of education in her family, and she sort of really sort of worked with her providing education for her family as a mom that would taught homeschooled. So I think there is sort of a variety in terms of where folks decided to sort of land their careers. So I look at that, and I don't necessarily, maybe being the youngest, I think there's a piece of that, again, with the family that I came from. I had older parents. I was the youngest, so I think there's quite a difference between my oldest brother's age and mine. I'm going to say 14 years, something like that. So again, I think that part, as being the youngest child with older parents, there was a caretaking role that sort of developed at that point in time.
Yeah.
So that sort of started it. And I went through my rebellion stage of that, like, I don't want to be doing this kind of thing. But then it really sort of resonated, and that sort of became something that sort of like, sort of would take in terms of, as my development, sort of like, it sort of led to some ways of sort of being a natural in terms of sort of working with folks.
So now you're helping people. I was thinking that maybe we can pivot, stay in the same place, but pivot to another subject. When I think, I love to think about one of the things that I'm curious about in life is the psychiatric profession, because I think, it's an interesting profession, I think, and it's probably very, very, very helpful today, I'm sure, because there's a lot of challenges in life. And I was wondering, now when people go to a doctor, like I had my problems with my shoulder, so I went to the doctor the other day because I was feeling pain, and he gave me a shot, and the pain was almost gone, but it's still there. But he took care of the pain. Now people come to you because they also have a certain kind of pain, but it's a different kind of pain. So how do you see yourself, like when you think about that? How do you see your role there?
And it's very different in different situations in terms of folks that are coming in, and I think there's it's not, you don't necessarily treat everybody the same.
Yeah.
And it's not a cookie cutter, and it's not like, I think in certain medical conditions you sort of see this works for this medication or this treatment or this physical therapy, and this is what you do, and this is a prescribed path. I think there are some of those in psychology. At the same point, it's very individualized. I think a lot of things I work with, especially is around trauma, around substance use, depression, anxiety. Those are sort of the four major ones that I work with. But when you really look at trauma, somebody comes in, they might have this large traumatic history that they've had. And the idea is not to really sort of, a lot of times they're coming in and just wanting to when they get to the point of wanting to see somebody, they want to just like talk it all out, and I
Yeah.
don't let that happen.
Why
Yeah.
not?
Because usually when you sort of deal with trauma, the fact is there's been a lot of issues that have occurred that they've really kept to themselves. They haven't really talked about it.
Right.
They get to a point and they say, I really need to sort of deal with this, and they feel like if I just come in and purge this, it's going to make it better.
Right.
At the same point, they've usually developed poor mechanisms of coping skills, strategies to sort of deal with stress, and all those other types of things. It's sort of like they might have developed some drug problems, some drinking problems, some maladaptive coping skills. So they just come in and talk about that trauma. All you've done is re-traumatize them. And basically they're sort of reliving that experience, and you're sending them out the door where they've sort of like just relived all of this information, and they're sort of like, and they're left with no coping skills. And they sort of resort back to sort of things that might not be healthy. So really one of my focus is I sort of use this image, and people will know that if anybody sees this, that they've worked with me, they'll say, there's a shelf over there. We're going to put that on the shelf, and we're going to leave that. We're just going to acknowledge that it exists,
Right.
but we're not going to sort of deal with that right now until you're
Right.
ready, and we'll just acknowledge it every time we meet. It's there.
Right.
And so we don't lose sight of it, but we're not going to delve into it until there's a time and a place to do that. And really focus about their healthy coping skills, what they do to sort of take care of themselves, to get them in a place where they start to feel a little bit more comfortable, and they have a way to manage the stress when they leave. And they manage the stress. So when we start talking about those issues, they need to have coping mechanisms, skills to sort of manage the feelings that come up, the
Right.
flashbacks that come up. They're coming up with how they can deal with some of those issues without resorting to negative or maladaptive coping mechanisms, such as whether it be substance use or any type of addiction or whatever the case may be. And really have a way of dealing with stress
Yeah.
and managing the symptoms. And then we sort of delve into the trauma and what that looks like. And then, because there's a lot of things that resonate, I call them cognitive distortions. They're things that they're thinking about in their head quite a bit, but it's only left in their head. They're not the only ones that are thinking about it. And they've lived
Right.
with that for such a long time, not to expose that right away. And it's really a sort of a process to do
Right.
that.
So
So
first you focus on trying to figure out coping mechanisms or healthy coping mechanisms.
Right. is the first part of working with somebody with trauma.
Yeah.
That you really want to work with them around having those healthy lifestyle, healthy coping skills to sort of manage the stress that they're going to feel,
Right.
and then piece by piece start as they feel comfortable talking
Right.
about the things that have been traumatic, and then really sort of when I say cognitive distortions, they start thinking. I sort of use the example, and this is just random, of somebody that sort of they had an experience that a teacher wrapped them on the knuckles with a ruler. So all teachers are bad. So in their mind, all teachers are bad, even though it was just this one person.
Right.
So it's really working around that distortion that not all teachers are bad. There's this bad experience that happened. There's this bad, this what occurred to you was bad, but it's not all people. And I think people walk around with a lot of those thoughts in their their heads for a long period of time. They're all bad. So really working through those distortions and what those are. So they have a better understanding of themselves and in relation to others, and they've walked around with this, these secrets for a long time.
How do you determine which? Well, actually, first, if you started with the coping mechanisms, what are some typical strategies that you pass on to people so that they can deal
Well, I
with
think it's. I always sort of say they have all the answers. I don't. They know them the best. So everyone's coping mechanisms might be very different. So I don't have all the answers. Ultimately, they have all the answers. Ultimately, they're going to leave me. The idea is not to see me and to be on their own. So they're going to come up with their own when we sort of work through what those might look like, whether it be exercise, whether it be music, whether it be art, whether it be meditation, whether it be, there's some techniques I'll teach about self-talk, about our messages that we give ourselves and being able to sort of talk to ourselves about, it might have really negative self-image or what those, and it's sort of really about challenging negative thoughts that they have about themselves or challenging issues that they think, that plague them in some ways. It's like there's a challenge because they've incorporated these beliefs into themselves, and they need to sort of retrain their brain in some ways to sort of think positively about themselves or positively about the things that they do, and that some of these things are really not true. that they've become to believe because they've just kept them to themselves for so long. So it really is around them learning and finding out and working with them to find out what are the skills, what are the things that really work for them. Is it going for a walk? Is it taking the dog out? Is it sort of exercise? Is it music? Is it writing? Is it journaling? There's different avenues for different people in terms of what those are. And things work differently for folks.
So you do a lot of, probably do, if I'm guessing right, that you do a lot of talking just about mundane things first and see what their lives are like and see what they're...
Well, a little bit just around the
Yeah.
engagement. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the first part is really sort of engaging people, feeling comfortable with each other,
Yeah.
getting to know each other a little bit, and sort of really just being somebody that's listening and hearing what they're having to say, as well as them getting to know me a little bit. I mean, it's not necessarily about me disclosing lots of things about me, but sometimes that's a helpful tool. But really, it's really around them feeling comfortable, and usually it's like, I'll ask that question after the first meeting. So here you've known me for 50 minutes, and you've already let me know all this stuff. How vulnerable that might make one feel. It's sort of like how is this feeling for you right now? And it's sort of like this is a time for us to sort of get to know each other, to sort of engage. So it's really about, and it could be if it's working with a kid or a teenager or something, it might be talking about how the Celtics did or something along those lines in terms of what that is, just around building a rapport and being able to sort of get to that point. At other points, people are coming in ready to talk, and then it might be slowing them down. So it really is gauging about where they're at. Don't go too fast, because you're going to go out the door and sort of say, oh my gosh, I just told that man I've only known for 45 minutes, 50 minutes, all this stuff, and I'll never go back. Versus slow and easy, let's talk about what you did over the weekend, how the sports teams are going, those type of things. So it really varies from person to person.
So you have been doing this type of process, or whatever you want to call it, for quite a bit now. This specific person to person.
Yeah, I think basically when I went back to grad school the second time, when my second child was born, at that point in time, I was doing a internship, and I was working with a teenager who was in foster care, a very resistant kid, and it was just about, even though we weren't making it, he wasn't going to open up to me. It was very guarded, but I knew that what we had was giving him. What in our dynamic was the fact that he knew that I was safe, not that I was going to be a major impact in his life, but I was so I role modeled a safe person to be able to talk to that he can use someplace else. But I said to myself, this is what I need to be doing. That's the work I need to be doing. So that was 99 was when I graduated from grad school the second time. I mean, I had done some of this work before with working with families in the early 80s. But this was, again, it was returning to my roots in some way, and out of the corporate world, and sort of getting back into doing it. I said, that's what I'm supposed to be doing.
So I heard you say you role model the person that I...
Right, because not necessarily, I mean, I sort of view it as I'm just one piece in people's lives.
Yeah.
Very small or maybe larger. And I think for some folks, it's I was just giving I was a consistent person, was a trustworthy person. I wasn't necessarily trying to fix them, change them. And when a kid has been through multiple homes, foster care and so forth, very non-trusting, very not going to open up. But all I did was provide a safe place and a safe environment that I hope my thought is it resonates with him, that at some point he's going to recognize, hey, a therapist, I can work with some of these kinds of things, and he does that with somebody else. So it's planting seeds in terms of that. So again, it's all about how you measure growth, how you measure progress. It's not all about suddenly he's all happy and not depressed. And it's not about that. It's
That's
really
not
about
in a
it's
sitcom show.
no, it's not. You have those cases, but I think it's very different. And it's about providing a safe environment for people to experience. Again, relationship along with sort of there is help out there, and they need to make the right connections with the right people. And it might not be me, but they know that I provided an education and I provided a place that they felt safe, that they might be able to use it somewhere else.
What are the things in all this time that you've been doing this? I wonder if you, throughout the whole time, if you look back and think about challenges that you have faced with different people, if you have seen maybe recurring challenges, now that we have this age, you want to call it the age of technology, if you want, or whatever, external factors that seem to have an effect on us as a race, as the human race. Have you seen
changes
that
and
keep cropping up?
yeah, I think
changes.
I think there is. I mean, I think just on again when I began working here in Whitensville in the clinic in Whitensville, that started off as a small place where again I think when we talk about someone who's in psychiatric crisis, that's a harm to themselves or harm to others, and they need to be what we call sectioned, where they're going to the hospital necessarily against their will. That would happen rarely. Very rarely in 2000, 1999, 2000, 2001. Now it's an occurrence that happens all the time. Not just this community, but all communities. I mean, I think we look at mental health issues and substance use issues throughout any community within Massachusetts. It's the same. They're seeing the same stats in terms of the frequency. So I think there's definitely an increase. I think that part of that is, there's again technology, as you sort of mentioned. I think that is a part of it. I mean, not a part of it in terms of psychiatry, but I think anxiety. We're always on. People are always on. People are always. I mean, when you think about bullying, when I was a kid, when people were bullied, left it at school, you go with your friends, it's over. Here in today's world, it follows you. It's whether it's Facebook, whether it's texting, whether it's there's no escape for people. So that's one component. And I always sort of say this too. And I think with the land of technology, and there's a lot of people who really they're addicted to their computers, they're addicted to their phones, they're addicted to those types of things. And then really is the social interaction piece becomes less and less, and it becomes more and more pronounced. I think back in years ago, so people would stay to themselves, and people would know people would stay to themselves, and they're sort of like, oh, we'll be, nice to that. Now it's just more prevalent because there's many avenues for them to be social, but yet they're in their own house and they're not talking.
Right.
It's in a very different way. So I think that adds to a lot of things. I think it adds to anxiety. I think it adds to just sort of inability to sort of work within social context and social situations. So I think it plays a part. At the same point, I'm like, as in humans, are we evolving? I mean, that's the other piece to it. It's like, pretty soon I might be the minority in terms of the social piece, and it's like everybody's going to be working on the computers and everyone's going to be working on the phones, and it's going to be less and less of that social interaction. So maybe as time goes on, we're evolving. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I mean, I think I sort of see that there's a lot more folks coming in that lack that social aspect in terms of being interacting with other folks, in terms of social phobias or not even needing to have the social contact, and then people worried about them because they're not having social contact.
Oh.
So there's...
Well, let's talk about something else that's maybe something fun.
Absolutely.
But this is fun anyway.
No, there's lots of fun stuff.
But you grew up in the Midwest. Where in the...
Actually, I was born in the Midwest.
Born in the Midwest.
My siblings were mostly raised in the Midwest. I sort of came out as the youngest.
Okay.
So I would say I'm truly a New Englander in many ways.
You are New
So
Englander.
I came as a...
say car. Can you say car?
Car. I still say the R. The R is going to be there.
Okay.
And it's aunt or aunt, and
Yeah.
So no, I was born in Illinois,
Okay.
and moved to Kansas, and then moved out here to the just south of Boston on the South Shore, and then my wife and I moved out here in 1994 to Whitensville. Like, how did we find Whitensville? I don't know. My boss at the time when I was working at the Mass Rehab Commission in Quincy lived here in Whitensville, and he's probably watching. Oh, geez. So, but anyway, he's here in Whitensville. It was sort of a weird thing. That's how I found Whitensville, along with my wife's grandparents. We used to go to a great restaurant in Uxbridge, the Cock and Kettle, way back when.
Yeah.
So that's how we found this area, and that's sort of where we sort of landed. And I was working at the time. I started working for Paul Revere Insurance Company. But my time in the Midwest, my cousins, my uncles, most of all my family is out there. In terms of extended family, again, our immediate family moved here, so we all basically went through schooling here in Massachusetts as well. So now we're sort of starting to migrate again. My sister lives in Florida. I have nephews in Virginia, so we're sort of spreading around. And what was interesting was we found out we had a lot of roots here in Massachusetts. We had no idea until Ancestry.com. My wife is really into that. We found out that where did we come from? It's like Massachusetts, and but that was not necessarily the case of
Whitensville?
not necessarily not Whitensville. In terms of that, and I know I have a lot of family now, my nephews and so forth going to Virginia. We found out we have a lot of people that it's just weird how that happens. It's sort of like a draw that sort of happened, and we ended up here. And it's like in Whitensville, think of a therapist like, I think I'd like a nice office on Newbury Street in Boston. I'm like, I'd like a nice office on Church Street in Whitensville. So I think it was it was meant to be. It's part of our lifestyle in terms of our families. I think we've enjoyed this community for sure.
Yeah.
In terms of the work, and also just the sense of community in a small town. It's been a great experience. We sort of feel like this is the place we're supposed to be.
How was life in South Boston? Was that a little bit?
It wasn't South Boston. We're close to South. I was actually on the South Shore.
South Shore. I'm sorry.
In Hull. Nantasket Beach,
okay.
Cohasset, Hingham area. So
wow,
so
there's a lot of water over there.
There's a lot of water, and we can't afford to live there. So we moved we moved west. It's been I think the way we moved is I took a job in Worcester at the time working for an insurance company, and that's how we got here. And then again, that's where I started grad school again and got right back to the roots of what I really felt was my profession and what I needed to do, or my calling in some ways.
Where was this again?
When we moved.
No, which school is that?
Oh, I went to undergrad. I was at Gordon College, and then graduate school. The first time was Cambridge College, and then I went back in '99 again at Cambridge College because I could transfer some of the credits for that from grad school. Because the first degree was in human service management and counseling, and the second was in counseling psychology.
Gordon College. That's a Christian college, is it?
It is.
Yeah. Your parents, how did you decide that?
That was, again, how did I decide that? Well, I sort of like, it's I think of my wife with the Holy Cross, and sort of like,
okay.
and we're like, okay, how do they meet? Holy Cross,
How do I match
Gordon.
that?
It's like one's Protestant, one's very Catholic. How do they do that? But I think again, it was again, I grew up in a faith home, Midwest Baptist, so that is not who I am now.
No.
But I mean, there's some certainly traits and sort of pretty ecumenical. We're sort of an ecumenical family that our kids have sort of known multiple religions, whether you're going to the St. Patrick's Church or you're going to the Congregational Church or we're going to another church, or it doesn't really matter. It's about community, and I think that's how I ended up at Gordon. I think it was there was an initial piece that it didn't last long. I was going to be a minister, but that was not. That didn't last long.
Wow, architect, minister.
There we go. So, and it all got folded into one.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
So again, I think that was it was a path that was sort of laid out at one point in time, and I sort of like again, I think like I say, those early days in high school of just doing that Big Brother program was like that was a huge deal for me at that time.
So that's because it might be a kind of a weird question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you ever find yourself thinking about, or let me ask it this way: how do you, and if you do, how do you incorporate the idea of God into who you are, your life, your practice, your family life, or does that?
Well, I think in family life, it's different than it is in certain professional life. I mean, I think in terms of working with folks, I think there's multiple pathways, and that there's no one way that sort of is the right way. I think it's sort of like what's right is right for the person. So I think it's supporting people in their spirituality, no matter what that is. It doesn't have to be Christianity. And I think there's a lot of room for a lot of people, and there are different pathways. And there's different pathways. My philosophy, there's different pathways for a lot of different reasons, because there's a lot of different people, and and their pathways need to be different. Otherwise, they wouldn't have that pathway. If everyone had my pathway, or XYZ's person's pathway, it wouldn't serve a purpose.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't match what their needs were, or match what their belief system. I think there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
So I like to think of it as one big ecumenical. It's like everyone's pathway is different. I think for our own life, it's just around spirituality. For whether it's like, and my youngest son, he'll go to one church, he'll go to the other church. He's like,
So what happened? What happened in Gordon College? You were going to be a minister, and then what happened to you?
I was still a major in psychology, though.
You were a major in psychology, but
Psych was always there, and I was actually
mind.
working at that point in time. I was working in a halfway house for psychiatrically challenged individuals, so it was my job to go there at nighttime when I was undergrad, and I would basically do homework and sleep, and get up the next morning, get them off, and get back to class or whatnot. So it was like really. I think that was the draw for the psych was there. The minister piece was like, I think I grew up in a religious family or in church. And I thought that's sort of where it was going, but it wasn't. It wasn't sort of the what I wanted, but it led me in a path. I always sort of say this. I always go to that old quote, goals are like stars. They're not necessarily to be reached, but it's a guide. And the fact is, it's sort of like, so if my goal is to be a minister or an architect, if I don't go down follow that goal, I'm not going to find the tributaries and the different pathways along the way to get to me where I need to go. So I need to have it. I don't care if it's going to be a senator or president or the CEO of a company. If you don't have that path, you're not going to necessarily go down a road that you're going to find your way. So it's like, it doesn't mean I have to reach that goal. It just means I have to have one, because my pathway is going to lead me to where I need to go. And it might start off to the right, to the left, and that's the pathway that, if I didn't have the goal, I wouldn't have started that pathway. I wouldn't have found those other paths to the left or to the right that I needed to go on.
Goals are like stars.
What's that quote? Goals are like stars, and not necessarily to be reached, but to guide you.
Reached,
something along those lines.
To guide you.
Right. So,
what is one of the greatest accomplishments you feel that you've achieved and that you're very proud of?
Greatest achievements.
Tell me one of the many that you have. Just pick.
Oh yeah, the many that I have. I have great kids. I think that's.
That was you?
I don't know. No. I guess that's true. Only partial in that. So
I never take credit for how many kids grew up.
No, I think that's something that I am proud of. I'm proud of my kids, and I think my wife, in terms of the dedication that she has with my kids, and we sort of made choices in how we sort of lived our life and sort of make sure that our kids had their needs met, or whether it be emotionally or somebody being there, those kinds of things. So, and she's a therapist as well, so our kids are doomed. Got two parents and a therapist, so it's like
she's also a therapist. Okay.
So, but I think that is I think that's an accomplishment of having a family and having a home and providing a safe place for them. I think that's the biggest accomplishment, and sort of having a good relationship with them.
So you think your kids should probably follow that same career path, or?
I hope not.
No.
No.
Be an architects or something.
It's funny. They're all going to be in. I feel they'll all be in some sort of public service. They will be. I have a. Do I dare talk about my kids, or they'll kill me?
Without embarrassing.
My daughter works at the agency I work for,
Yeah.
so she does a lot of the work until she, graduated with her history degree, but she's now pursuing her master's in history to be a teacher. She'll be a teacher, and then my son is graduating this year in poli-sci and history as well. I know he's done an internship at the State House. I'm sure he will be looking in terms of the state and public service and so forth. We'll see where it goes. Who knows? And then my youngest.
So you have three.
I have three, and my youngest is at Northbridge High. He's into sports. He's into drama. He's into all sorts of things.
Wow.
He goes, Dad, I did the interest surveys. Look what it is. I'm gonna be a social worker or a substance use counselor. So I'm like, no. so
That's a good thing.
No, it is a good thing. It's like it's a tough field in some ways in terms of making a living and doing that. It's sort of a lot of hard work. Not necessarily compare it. It's the service that everybody wants. It's not necessarily the service that everyone pays for. So it's tough in that sense. But I think they'll all be working. I think that again, having two parents that are therapists, they've grown up with it. I've worked at family continuity here in town for 20 years, 20 years in this past January.
Wow.
So they've grown up with it. They sort of know the ins and outs of human services and the programs that we have. So they're aware of it. It's been part of their life. So I know that some of that they're incorporating that within their life as well on some level. But it might be different careers that they do, but that'll be a part that they'll always have there'll be that sense of altruism or working with people that'll be there.
Helping the community.
Mm-hmm.
So what's something that you've heard your children say, any of your children say, that has warmed your heart when you heard it?
Something my kids have said that warmed my heart. I'm trying. Oh, really embarrassing.
No.
It was just a funny one. It was like my youngest is like, Dad, don't worry. Don't worry, because he's got his little pad downstairs in the cellar. He's got his TV and all sorts of weight benches, and he has his friends over, and he's like, don't worry, Dad. Don't worry, I'll take care of you. I'm not going to be eating Cheetos. I'm not going to be having you give me Cheetos and cooking me chicken wings all the time. I'm going to go to college and I'll be a success and I'll take care of you. So that sort of was humorous, but it was also sort of it was sort of nice to sort of hear something like that. It was a sort of a funny thing to sort of hear. I think that again, I was just sort of saying I'm leaving my family continuity. I've been there for 20 years. I'm leaving. The end of this month, after 20 years of being there and sort of doing, again, a new chapter.
Yeah.
So I think that is huge for my family in the sense that I've been doing this for 20 years. It's been part of their life. So I think another thing has sort of been said is like, it's sort of hard to imagine. So it's like that's a big deal. It's a big deal that he's leaving this. They know my involvement with the community. They know the connections I have with different folks. And it's sort of like, and I think their knowledge of that, maybe I've had some impact in the community in some level. That sort of feels good in some ways. At the same point, it's sad, but it's also another chapter that sort of is happening. So so in terms
Is
of
someone else going to come in and step in and?
it's unknown. I'm leaving. I'm staying on as a consultant for a couple of things. One of the big things that we've just opened up a new program here in town called NOAH. Which is No One Walks Alone. It's a recovery support center, which is really around folks that are in recovery from substance use. It's a social gathering. It's a safe place for people to go to in recovery to sort of, coping skills, social. If somebody wants to go to the bar to watch the football game, they're going to go here to watch the football game. We're going to have pool tables there. We have ping pong. It's a safe place for those in recovery. People, go through treatment. They come back to the community. And there's nothing here for them. So this will be a safe place for people to come and be a part of, and it's exciting. So that part I'm staying on board until it's sort of up and going.
Yeah.
We just opened the doors not that long ago.
Where is it at?
It's on Spring Street. It's 9 Spring Street. It's where Catholic Charities used to be.
Yeah.
So the owner just
Here in Northbridge.
here in Whitensville, right
wow.
behind the Presbyterian Church on Spring Street. So it's they rehabbed the building, did a great job. I give it to Tom, our landlord, who really did a great job. He owner of Harry's Pizza, so he really did stepped up to the plate and really did a great job in terms of that building and that rehabbing that building for us and sort of that program. So it's a great program. It's run by people in recovery. So I want to make sure that gets to the place it needs to be. So I'm going to stay on as a consultant for that. I'm going to be doing some other work in Connecticut and a couple of other places. So a new chapter.
But you plan to stay in Northbridge, though, right?
I'm going to stay in Northbridge. I'm going to live in Northbridge, and I'm going to continue to have my practice, which is right next to your wife's business, which is how we sort of connected. So that's my retirement plan. And eventually, I'll just be there part time, and that will be what I'll be doing.
Well, you came here after work. And I know I came here. I went home first, and I came. But I'm pretty tired after this. I suspect you're probably a little tired too. But you seem to have a lot of energy still in you. So when you go home and you sit down and relax, or what do you usually do to relax?
Well, it can be a lot of things. Tonight it might be just turning on the TV and sort of seeing what's going on in the political world.
Oh, that's going to relax you?
Well, I'm just going to get a sense of what that is. I have 2 dogs at home. They're going to sort of be climbing all over me. It's sort of
Yeah.
like taking them out is sort of a relaxing. I have this great lab hound mix that a recent rescue. It's been great for exercise and so forth. So it's been good. She's had some medical issues recently, so the exercise has not been as great as usual. But she's got the clean bill of health at this point, so we're going to be doing a lot more of the walking and the hiking and stuff that was what we planned on doing in the beginning. So that'll be an area. So, and again, it's sort of like it's a mental shutdown in terms of being able to sort of shut things off from the day and just sort of relax at home and sort of see what's going on from everyone else's day as well.
Okay. Read once in a while? Or?
Never.
Never?
Never for pleasure. It's terrible.
Really?
And I think, again, the new chapter of life, I think,
Yeah.
is going to be different. I think the responsibilities of the work I've been doing with family continuity has just been a lot. So I think it's now time to take a step back. More
Yeah.
times hiking with the dogs. Maybe I'll be reading
Maybe start reading a
for
little bit.
pleasure,
For pleasure.
versus whether it's a work proposal or writing a grant. And that's usually where my reading is usually around research or doing something along those lines for programming. But now it's a new chapter.
But you go to events or parties and things like that?
Yeah, sure,
Socialize?
absolutely. I think I look forward to vacations. I look toward, but a lot of it has been there's been a lot of long hours. So I think I'm looking forward to this new chapter in terms of being able to sort of step back. I think we want to do a little bit more enjoying of life and doing those typical things. Like I love the idea of like going home midday and just taking the dog for a walk and enjoying that. And I know we have next week's school vacation week, so we're going to just taking the week off and just not a lot planned. Just sort of we'll go down to Newport for a couple of days. We'll do some other it's just day trips, those types of things, and just sort of enjoy it. And then we have our standard summer vacations in July, a couple of weeks down the Cape. But we have certain things that we definitely do where we have we've been doing for years that we'll continue to do. So.
Well, let's take a step back a little bit, and I'm thinking about if you could tell me a specific person in your life that you can think of that you said, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that person.
Oh, I wasn't. It wasn't. That was a different, because I was like, when I saw that question at one point, I said, there's many people at different chapters, there's different people. But now you put that piece on it, I'm like, okay.
That's why I told you the questions were not going to be necessarily what I was going to ask.
So
you.
I think
besides your mother. 'Cause
I was
obviously
going to
you
go. I
wouldn't
was
be
going to
here.
go. My parents. It's sort of a significant, in terms of if it wasn't for her, I
But if
would
it's
not
your
be.
mother, that's fine. That's, and
No,
why?
I think of family. I think so. People that have influenced my life. I think there's probably. I even sort of said. I think the initial piece about having the religious and the spiritual piece in terms of like initially going to be a minister. It was not lived long in terms of when I went to school. I'm like, it's not for me. Was probably a minister in terms of the church. So I think that was a person that was, his name was Bill Turpey, was a minister, a Baptist minister, very ecumenical, was very involved with a monastery that we were involved with. So again, the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, it really didn't necessarily matter. I thought that he was a great role model and a great person that sort of did a lot of good things and worked. And I think that piece about really being open to multiple religions, I think it was an important piece for me. So I think that would be a person that I would think of as well in terms of that. So
Not your mother, huh?
well, no, definitely my mom. There's no question, no question, and my grandparents as well. I think of them as sort of folks. Again, it's quite different. Midwestern Southern Baptists and Craig Maxim in New England is very different. I actually, I have a cousin. Named Craig Maxim, so who's out in Kansas, but he's a priest. He's a Catholic priest as well. So again, that the religious piece is sort of, again, it's sort of spread. It's not just how we were brought up in terms of.
You remember your grandparents well?
I
growing up
do.
with them?
My maternal grandparents for sure.
Yeah.
He would come out to visit. We would go out there every April during the summer. We'd go out. He was living in St. Louis when I was a child, so we would be going out there. Fond memories of every April school vacation. We'd be in St. Louis for sure, and he would come out here at Christmas time. Mostly, I mean, his wife had passed away at an earlier age, and certainly my paternal grandmother was Hungarian Romanian, so she came directly from Romania, and she had 4 boys, which my father being the youngest of his 4, and she would come out during the summers as well. So very, strong memories of them, and they're all very involved with their churches in the Midwest, the Bible Belt, I guess you would call it. So, so yes.
So I was thinking as you were talking about how in your job, going back to your job a little bit, you have people coming to you and sharing things with you, and sometimes you have your methodology on how to address the issues and where to start, and how you begin with building a positive image and then move on to piecemeal, I gather, from all the issues that need to be dealt with. So these people come to you for this, and you have to be prepared to address the situation as a whole and over a period of time. Now, who do you go to for that? Who is that person that's you for you?
There's a requirement, I think, when initially coming in the field, that you really have a sponsor. Before you're licensed, you are working with somebody else who's licensed for a couple of years, 2 years actually, of two years, almost like an apprenticeship, that you have that experience with, that you sort of go back and you sort of problem solve, you sort of go back and sort of take information from, as well as share, things that you're experiencing, or things that, secondary trauma, or whatever the case may be, in terms of some of the things you're dealing with. It's a requirement to become licensed. At the same point, all therapists, or they should, have what they call clinical supervision. So they have somebody that they sort of go to be able to talk about or process different things that they're experiencing, the treatment that they're providing, as well as there might be specialty areas. So certainly trauma, I've had specific training in trauma, specific coaching in trauma. So there's, some folks that, I think you're required to, I had coaching visits with a psychologist that was their specialty in terms of some evidence-based practices around trauma. So I think that's a requirement, that everyone has that. So there's been multiple different people at different stages of life, or in a career. And then at the same point, CEUs, we're all required to have continuing education credits over. We have to renew our license every 2 years, so we have to go through trainings again, around specific areas, that we're required to do. So I think that's an ongoing process. In the clinics that we work in, we do the same thing. We have group supervision, where there's a group of clinicians together sort of doing that, whether it's around client-specific information, or it might be around more theory, or more approaches, or more evidence-based practices, and then there's individual supervision as well. So even once you're licensed, you should continue to have either a peer supervision or sort of some type of supervision. So I have that within the field. It's built within the field to sort of have that throughout. Again, at the clinic we have multiple supervisors and multiple folks that are providing that in terms of that piece.
So what about your? I guess the question, you did answer that question, but also I was thinking also more in terms of your deeper journeys that you have.
I think, right. Yeah. I mean, at this point in time, I think that is sort of something. I mean, I think there's different people, places, and things throughout life that are provided. I mean, I think I'll sort of acknowledge, again, they sort of say therapists are great. It's great to go through therapy yourself. So at a very earlier age, I sort of did that myself to sort of be on the other side and experience that and understand that. At the same point, I think there's different people, whether it's my current supervisors or peer supervisors or different people in the field that sort of provide that piece, or at the same point, family, in terms of being able to provide that, or in terms of a spiritual component, it could be a minister. I won't necessarily label any particular person, just because I won't put them out there.
Oh, no, I don't mean that.
Yeah, but
I was thinking if you maybe, do you ever go to your wife for challenges in your heart that only she can.
Well, absolutely,
Yeah.
and vice versa. I mean, again, my wife's a therapist as well,
Yeah.
so we're doomed in that way.
Yeah.
So again, I think there's those parts that we sort of again and it might be very different. I mean, her conversations with her
Yeah.
would be very different than the conversations I would have with anybody else.
Yeah,
Again,
yeah.
as we sort of talk about our new chapter that we're sort of going through, that's only something that well now everybody knows that's sort of what we're talking about right now. It's sort of like where we're going now. And what
Only
we
the
sort of-
people that watch. One.
only the people. So, but again, that's the part that we're looking at now, and those are the things that sort of we're looking forward to, and what that looks like for us in terms of the new chapter.
There's any going back to school maybe to do some architectural training again?
No,
or-
not at all. If there is anything, maybe I'll design some cottage somewhere, somewhere that's on a beach. Or something
Yeah.
like-
Well, what would you like to do if it was something that you thought I could do this forever? This fun thing that I want to do. What would you like to do?
Fun thing I could do forever.
Yes.
It's hard to imagine not having some work component to that.
Yeah.
So I think it would be just my private practice, the office right next to your wife's store, doing that, seeing a few people, and then really around sort of, again, it's like walking, going out with the dogs, hiking, and sort of enjoying life. I think we're looking at our trip to Europe, and sort of what we want to do, but just enjoying life and I remember going to just traveling. And I think we'd like to travel, and I think we're looking at sort of with my wife into ancestry, looking at where all our family has been. Let's go back and look at all the places that, even that whether it's in the Mid-Atlantic states or maybe it be Italy or Hungary or Romania. It's just sort of looking at those places and going back, and we have a lot more information than we had 5 years ago versus 10 years ago versus the more people that are involved in sort of looking at ancestry, the more that you find out. So my wife has got that down. I'm like, I had no idea I was related to such people. So thank you for doing all the research on that.
You
So-
probably visit some of the places where your ancestors and so forth.
Right, and some right here in Massachusetts that we had no idea existed. So,
Huh.
and how we ended up here.
What is your heritage? What do you?
My father, my parents, Romanian, Hungarian on my father's side. Definitely directly, came directly from Romania. And then on my mother's side, it's more French, English, Scottish.
You know what? We are running out of time.
Oh, how did that happen?
I just want to give you the opportunity then at this time. I usually give my guests an opportunity for you to just to think briefly about just supposing that somebody may stumble upon this show and something that you would say, this would be the one thing I would want to share with the stranger out there who stumbles upon this show. This has, whether it's something that has helped you personally or something that you think could be a uplifting message or whatever.
Well, I think it's never being afraid to sort of take on a challenge, or to take on something new. I'm older now. It's like the idea of me finding a new job at my age and sort of changing career, it was possible, and I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So I think that's not to be afraid of that. And again, I sort of think back of like when my wife is pregnant with my second son. It's like I'm going back to grad school. Not to be afraid of sort of embracing some of those kinds of things and taking those risks, and to sort of make your dreams come true, in terms of what feels right for you at that point in time. And sort of like to embrace it versus sort of like, oh, I can't do it, or it's the wrong time in life. Sometimes you have to balance those things, but really, I think taking the risk and being able to do something, and so you're not sort of saying later on, I wish I did, in terms of to do that. So take the risk, calculated risk. Don't just be living risky,
Count
but
the
take
cost.
a calculated risk, and follow what your heart says and what your passion says and what your dreams say, and being able to do that. Because I mean, certainly we've enjoyed. Yes, there's a lot of places I could have been working and things I've been doing, but right here in the town and in the community, it's been a great experience. So don't listen to that part that sort of needs to sort of take that risk and do something you wouldn't think you would normally do.
Well, Greg, thank you for letting me steal this hour from
Oh,
you today.
absolutely.
I hope it was a worthwhile
I know,
relinquishing
like an
of.
hour talking about yourself. I'm like, jeez.
And thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. I hope you have had a good time.
Oh, it was great. Thank you.
And thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next time when the next person comes and shares their story.